if you type in lesbian online, it's anything but lesbians, obviously, but it's sad that you have to type in TERF to actually find actual lesbian representation.
I'm Jane.
Hi, I'm Alison Ellis.
And I'm Beth.
And this is
Insightful Sisters.
So, hello and welcome. We've got Alison Ellis with us tonight. Alison sort of hit LGB Alliance as a speaker this year and wowed everybody, talking about the difficulties of being a young lesbian in today's world. She's a bit of a social media queen. And she's writing a book along with Tonya. So she's going to tell us a bit about that later. So hello, Alison. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Oh, it's fabulous to have you. So can we start by thinking about what it was like for you? You're still quite young, but what was it like growing up and sort of finding your space in the world?
So I grew up in a village and it was very isolating, and I got bullied a lot in high school over the fact I was a lesbian when I came out around 15. And as a result of that, I struggled really badly with my mental health, and I had to go to the doctors, and they recommended me to go to the school counsellor. When I was seeing the school counsellor, they recommended me to go to the local LGBT youth group. And I thought I was going to find other lesbians like myself there. I was really excited to meet other women like me. But when I went there, we all got asked to introduce ourselves and what our identities and pronouns were. I just said I was a lesbian. I didn't really understand what all this was. And we all got given these colouring in sheets on like all these flags and gender identities that I just didn't understand at all.
You were 15 when this happened.
Yeah, I was.
So I'm already thinking in terms of safeguarding, not just safeguarding, but duty of care. So you go to the doctor tells you to go to school and ask the counsellor. So that's sort of, moving the problem sideways a little. And then the school counsellor sends you off into this external group. What age were the people in the group?
They were all around my age, I'd say. Yeah, all teenagers. A lot of them identify as like demisexual and genderqueer.
What does demisexual mean, Alison? Because I think some of our listeners won't have heard that word before.
It's when you have to get to know someone and everything to be attracted to them, some nonsense like that.
I think I identify as that. So who was running the group?
It was a woman with bright pink hair, but I think she was straight. It's usually the case in those groups.
So you were confronted by flags and colouring in, which seems quite childish for 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
Were you introduced to the others in the group? Was there any chance to get to know people?
There was, yeah. We all kind of got movies to watch and everything, but I just kind of felt there was something off about it because I didn't see any other lesbians like me there, and I just thought the atmosphere was really kind of off as well. Like I just had this feeling that something was off. And the next day I got told not to come back by the youth group leader, one of the members, and the school counsellor.
Oh, wow.
And I think this is on the basis I didn't understand all the flags and stuff, and that was just a lesbian. I must have made the others afraid of me or something because I was a lesbian. I don't know. I just get that feeling.
Horrible for you. But I mean, I can't see that there's anything wrong in not understanding something if you're confronted with something new, and you're presumably seeing other women who looked like you but didn't call themselves what you were calling yourself.
I think it didn't click at the time. there may well have been other lesbians in that group, but they identified as, trans men and stuff, like other identities instead of lesbian. But it didn't really click at the time because it doesn't when you're that age. I did try and reach out online. You try and go to, the helplines and stuff. But even in like the chat groups and things like that, it's all this gender nonsense as well. I felt like there was something like wrong with me because I'm like the wrong kind of lesbian. It's like they're really afraid of lesbians. I think it's the whole like turf stuff as well.
Often the experience of being a gender critical woman is compared to a witch hunt, but with lesbians, it really genuinely feels like that online. Lesbian spaces are hunted down, they're infiltrated. There's this paranoia the moment that you identify strongly as, I am actually just a lesbian, I'm a lesbian, I'm not any other label. People immediately see that as a red flag and start worrying that you're a TERF, and it seems disproportionately sort of used, that slur against lesbian women.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, sometimes I've gone into some groups and they're not actually lesbian groups because their definition of a woman is just crazy. So if any lesbian in the LGBTQ plus kind of groups or the woke lesbian groups say anything about a lesbian is a same-sex attracted woman, they'll get kicked out and called a TERF. So yeah, it just makes it very, very difficult for young lesbians that have just come out and they're wanting to find community. It's very, very hard for them, and I feel very sorry for them.
How do these spaces define the word lesbian?
A lot of the LGBTQ plus women's groups describe a lesbian as a non-man loving a non-man or something that's nothing to do with homosexuality. It does give me a massive migraine if I think about it too much. I think it does everyone.
So you've really had to find your own way and make your own spaces. How did you resolve that yourself?
After that incident with the LGBT youth group, I kind of stayed away from anything like LGBTQ plus related, like the groups and stuff, because I just thought, well, I'm just a lesbian. I don't know why there's all this like gender stuff that I don't understand. Even at university, I avoided the LGBT society there. It was very isolating during my time at uni as well.
And what a shame, because in the past, I can remember from my own university days, it was a real opportunity for people to actually come out. It was the place to go to do that and to find other people that you wanted to be with.
Yeah. And another thing I must note during my time at university, I did know two women at the start that called themselves lesbians, but by the time we all graduated, they identify as trans men. And a lot of the lesbians around me that I did meet just gradually identified as trans men in real life. So I just thought it was really strange what was going on, but I didn't really say anything about it.
Why do you think that happened? Why do you think those young women opted out of being named as a lesbian? What's wrong with being a lesbian, do you think?
I think it's the whole they make it out that you're a bigot if you're an actual lesbian. And also, I think I did see one of those lesbians that I knew at university get bullied online because she was a lesbian. She was called like a bigot and stuff by this man.
It's fairly unbelievable, and it feels like we're pushing people into hiding their true selves.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a tragedy. So how about other gay spaces? How did you access those? Did you go to things like pride events or bookstores or that sort of thing?
I did, yes. So that was just after I graduated at university. A cafe opened around the time and did hold a lesbian, well, quote unquote lesbian event. once and they posted it on social media. I didn't go to this event, but I did see a picture of it, and there were many terrified young women on one side of the room and a man on the other. So I'm just like, I'm so glad I didn't go to that.
Is that why you opted out? Did you
Yeah.
guess that was okay? And you were right.
We've sort of spoken a little bit there about how it was, these in-person events and looking for your community. I think probably a lot of lesbians, or especially younger lesbians, can relate, and there's a natural drive then towards online spaces and social media to look for information. What's it like in terms of online lesbian spaces?
Well, it's an absolute mess when young lesbians try and reach out online. It is a battlefield. Wow. Okay. So there's a lot of Reddit groups and stuff that they might get caught up in that will automatically just kick them out and call them a TERF for standing up for themselves and saying what a lesbian actually is. I mean, there are a few good places to reach out, but it's very difficult to find them. And a lot of young lesbians automatically think they'll find lesbians in the whole LGBTQ plus stuff because it's got the word lesbian in the acronym, which makes it really confusing. Obviously, if they're feeling very isolated and they're struggling with homophobia and they've got nowhere to go, their only option is to go online and try and find lesbians there. But our dating apps have completely been ruined. They're full of men calling themselves women and people that are not actually lesbians. I've had a really bad experience on a dating app, so I've not used one in years. I'd rather meet someone face to face. I think we all would, but sadly, that's what it's like, especially for the younger generations now. Everything's online for them. They don't really have any social skills.
I mean, it is worth noting that there is that sort of trend there where younger people do a lot of their socializing online. So, in a sense, these online spaces are really important. So, I can imagine it must be hard to figure out if you're actually speaking to another woman in these online spaces as well.
It's very tricky. Yeah, it's very unsafe for lesbians and women in general online because it's just full of predators at this point. It's just full of men being creepy. You'll probably try and strike up a conversation with someone behind an anonymous account calling themselves a lesbian, but in reality, it's a man. And you just can never be too careful. So sadly, the lesbians that I do know that are online, they have to be very careful. And if they hold lesbian groups and stuff, it has to be really heavily vetted. There's really strict rules on it, sadly, but that's the way it is, unfortunately.
What's clear from what you've said there is that there's an awful lot of animosity towards lesbians in real life, but also on online platforms. In the face of that, you have begun producing videos and clips explaining the lesbian experience, what it means to be a lesbian, and, challenging some of the ideas that are trying to infiltrate those spaces. Can you tell us about that? What is it that you do?
So I make TikTok videos, essentially battling against all the nonsense spread around like what a lesbian is and isn't on there, because there's an awful lot of stuff on there that it's just awful for lesbians. So yeah, I make videos stating facts about what a lesbian is, battling all the trans activists.
Why TikTok?
Because I feel like it's a platform that a lot of younger people use, and they're the most vulnerable to this trans activism stuff, especially young lesbians that are seeking representation and community online. There's an awful lot of hostility aimed at them. It's terrible. And it's my job to say, hey, this is what's happening. Just so young lesbians are aware of like how bad it is online for lesbians.
There's a real clear sort of issue around censorship on social media across all platforms, but on TikTok especially, people have to come up with some very creative ways to get around content filters. Have you
Oh
had
yeah,
issues
definitely.
have you had issues with algorithm and filters, have you?
I have, yeah, like loads of issues because even if you type in a fact on what a lesbian is, that will get taken down. I've had loads of like violations. I've had videos taken down. I've had loads of accounts taken down as well. I'm on like my sixth account so far. So luckily it's not been taken down yet. It's my longest standing one.
And do you find that your accounts are being taken down by the algorithm itself or automatic content filters, or is there also an element of malicious reporting?
I think it's all of those because I have been mass reported by the trans activists. It's not a fun experience, but I keep pushing forward. I keep making new accounts if they get taken down because at the end of the day, those like the comments from trans activists, they just say all the same exact stuff over and over again. So you get used to like all their insults and stuff. It doesn't bother you anymore. What's important is that it reaches younger lesbians so they know what's going on. It's just terrible that lesbians can't meet up without being protested and stuff. It's just crazy. Yeah. Even like around language as well. You're being redefined. I'm not gonna let that happen either, especially online, because it's just so much misinformation about what a lesbian is online, and it leads us to being really misunderstood. As with more like tomboy lesbians as well, they're like the worst kind of impacted by it because they're not seeing butch or tomboy representation online. They're just seeing these lesbians call themselves men and non-binary and stuff. So it's just not making any sense. It's like you're not allowed to be butch or tomboyish woman anymore. It's like you have to call yourself a man. It's not making sense. So yeah, that's why I'm trying to, like show them what a lesbian actually is. And this came from me coming across Magdalene Burns' videos. So yeah, it's really important that more lesbians try and speak out like this, even if they do get banned.
You've mentioned before about finding that space online through Magdalene's video. Do you want to tell people a
Yeah,
bit about her and what she meant to you and what she could mean to other young women?
yeah. So it was just after I went to an LGBT women's meetup group before I knew what was actually going on. And there was a young woman in that group. She was very gender non-conforming. She had short hair and everything. And I thought she was very attractive. So I went to try and get to know her a bit better. And upon like having a conversation with her and stuff, she she called herself like gender fluid, and she used like a man's name and man's pronouns and stuff. And I just didn't understand why, because it's supposed to be a women's group anyway. So it's like, what the heck's going on here? And she was saying how there were these evil turf lesbians at Todmorden Women's Disco. And I'm just like, what the heck's a turf? I've never heard of that word before. So afterwards, I Googled up what a turf was and I started looking into what the heck's a turf and everything because I felt it was a bit strange how she was insulting lesbians like this, saying that they were evil and bigoted and everything for actually being lesbian. So I just started looking into it and I started seeing all these screenshots of lesbians being gaslit and pressured into accepting men identifying as lesbians. And I had a look on YouTube as well. And it took quite a while for Magdalene's videos to pop up in my feed. And I started like watching them and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, like it was a huge impact.
Wow.
Because I've been looking for years for those answers to what was actually going on.
Mm.
And it made so much sense.
Mm.
And it just blew my mind, really.
Mm.
And her videos taught me that it was okay to just be a lesbian.
Mm.
And you didn't have to identify as a man or,
Mm.
you know, like be feminine and wear makeup. There is the in between, and that's okay. You don't have to do either of those things. And it's really important that more young lesbians see her videos and try and make sense of them instead of calling her a bigot and a TERF all the time. You know, like, have they actually listened to what she's saying? Because it makes complete sense to me.
They're quite timeless, the videos. She says it how it is, and she's completely uncompromising.
Yeah, that's what I noticed as well. It was so relatable, and it's just really uncommon that you're able to find that lesbian representation online as it is now. You know, because if you type in lesbian online, it's anything but lesbians, obviously, but it's sad that you have to type in TERF to actually find actual lesbian representation.
Do you want to explain about the book, what you're doing, you know, what you're calling it, how you're putting it together? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So it is in the early stages at the moment. We are still gathering stories from young lesbians. We already have quite a few from different countries, so that's very interesting. And one of them did come across Magdalene's videos.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just me that it's happened to here. There are other lesbians that have had a very similar experience to me. So it is really good to know that I'm not alone. But I'm going to try and not give too much away because I want people to read it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. What's the timeline that you've got on it?
There isn't a set deadline at the moment, but we do aim to release the book later this year.
That's really excellent. So what sort of stories are coming in? I know you don't want to give too much away, but just a little, some tantalizing glimpse.
So we've had a few from various different countries so far, and a lot of them have a really similar experience to me. It was really reassuring for me to read those stories because it's just like sometimes you feel like you're the only one going through it, and sometimes I have these moments where I'm like, what on earth is going on here? Because it's just so, you know, it's just too crazy to kind of process sometimes. So it's just good to know that there are other women like myself in the same boat.
What about in terms of other support? I know you're involved in the LGB Alliance. Are there other groups that you've managed to join and be a part of?
Yes, so I'm also part of Lesbian Strength, and that's like local to me as well. It's based in the Leeds area, so that's good. Well, I'm part of quite a few like smaller lesbian groups that have found me on X as well. So I'm in quite a lot of group chats.
So, I mean, we've spoken a lot about, you know, online spaces and real world spaces for lesbians. There's an awful lot of pressure, it seems, towards lesbians to be open to dating trans men. Have you sort of seen that on the dating scene? Have you come across that before?
I have briefly come across the cotton ceiling. I've seen like the article that's been written by the man calling himself a woman as well. I think it's really disturbing the lengths that men will try and go to try and correct lesbians. It's sickening and it's disgusting. And I remember that Magdalene also covered this in one of her videos as well. Yeah, it just makes lesbians feel really unsafe. Like we need a space we can go to temporarily escape men bothering us, homophobia, just a place where we can meet other women and date and everything like that, because there just isn't anything. And a lot of young lesbians are identifying as men because they feel unsafe.
Yeah, I mean, it must be difficult. There must be this sense of fatigue when you just need to find your own space and your own space is not there anymore. Could you sort of define the cotton ceiling? Because it's a play on the glass ceiling, the oppression of women in the workplace. So it goes beyond just sort of an entitlement to being dated by lesbians, and it suggests actually that there's a hierarchy where lesbians are oppressing trans women by not sleeping with them. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what these men calling themselves lesbians are making it out. So they think lesbians, on the basis of our homosexuality, is oppressing them somehow for not being attracted to them. It's absolutely ridiculous and it's coercive. It's it's complete coercion. It's disgusting. So the cotton ceiling is basically where it's basically a way to like break into a lesbian's underwear, to put it more lightheartedly. That yeah, it's just grim.
I mean, it's very sort of uncomfortable, the mental imagery around it, and the cotton, like you say, is when women sort of are talking about breaking through the glass ceiling, the cotton is, like you say, lesbians' underwear.
I'm thinking all the time you're talking, Alison, I'm thinking that it's been really difficult for you to find a space and a way to go ahead. But I'm also thinking that in the long term, you've made exactly the right decision. What do you think will happen to those other women, those women that you met in that first session, the colouring in session, and then the women that you met at university? They've opted out. How do you see their future?
Well, we can only hope to try and speak out about it as much as possible in the long run, because in the future they may well realize what they've done and what people around them have done to them and everything, and that they've been failed and they've been let down, and they were struggling with other issues that they didn't get the correct help for either. So we can only hope they can realize what's actually happening and try and speak out about it as well, because they will get the support they need. I mean, they need the space.
I mean, it's often the fear for somebody when they're a teenager in coming out and trying to get onto the dating scene. Often the fear is that you're limiting your dating pool, aren't you? Effectively, you've got to find other people that are same-sex attracted. How are those women who've opted out of being lesbians? How are they going to find other women like them?
I think it's really interesting to look into how hormones affect them and everything like that, because to me it just seems like conversion therapy. It really does. And I mean, they'll probably I think in the future you'll just be left with loads of women that are most likely lesbians with, been ruined by the medical practice and everything. They'll be left with no breasts, they'll have facial hair and everything, and they'll just feel really rubbish about themselves. Um, so hopefully they'll probably be able to group up and talk about their experiences as well. I know there's a lot of detransitioned women that are doing that as well. There's a lot of detransitioner groups. So it's good that they're bunching together and fighting back against it as well, because my guess is the detransitioners are going to get a lot of rubbish for it, from the trans activists and from people who want them to conform back to their original kind of gender stereotype as well, because I feel like there's a lot of people trying to pressure them to be feminine and everything, and that's part of the problem. So it's like these detransitioners are stuck in a really vulnerable place because there's loads of people targeting them and trying to manipulate them and stuff as well.
What would you say to the politicians that are telling us that this doesn't happen, that we've got to be kind?
My message to the politicians that push and support the whole trans women and women stuff, they are throwing young same-sex attracted people, in particular young lesbians, under the bus. They are selling them a lie that their problems will be fixed if they take surgeries and hormones, that all their problems will just go away, and it's not going to work because you have to really understand where these young people are coming from to tackle the issue. It's just ridiculous what's going on. It's like a modern form of conversion therapy.
Seems so ironic that we're forcing people into sort of rigid gender stereotypes.
Yeah, it's just really crazy because someone who supports equal rights and wants everyone to get along and everything is, it's just crazy that we get labelled bigots and TERFs and everything, and that we're right wing and things like that, even though we're not. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Nothing means what it's supposed to anymore, and it's just making it really difficult to communicate with each other.
Yeah, language is really important, isn't it?
It seems like it's so rooted in many ways in lesbophobia and misogyny as well, because when you look at spaces, for example, that are exclusively for gay men, some of them are very clear and outright ban participation from trans men or from girls who identify as transmasculine or want to use those spaces for whatever reason. They're outright banned, and there's no equivalent of TERF for them men. There's no equivalent slur and there's no equivalent outrage. People just accept it. I mean, some people say that that's because trans men or women in general are less pushy and less territorial than their male counterparts. But even so, I mean, it seems that people are desperate for an excuse to have a pile on in any woman's space or to shout down any woman, whether it's online or in real life.
And you were at the LGB Alliance when they released the crickets, weren't you, Alison?
Yeah.
So, I mean, building on what Bex has just said, what was that like? And that was crazy.
So when I was at the LGB Alliance conference, I think we had like a coffee break, and when it was time to go back into the stage room where all the seats were, I went and sat down, and there were a few people at the front row that were about to sit down, and I see that a few of them kind of stood back up and they were like looking at the floor like, oh, what is that? And I just thought, oh, something a bit weird going on here. Is something happened? And then I think I looked at the floor and it was just full of crickets, and I thought there was like an infestation or something, but there were crickets. So I'm just like, what the heck is going on? They were all crawling up my legs and everything. So we had to evacuate the room. And I was just like, oh my God, what the heck happened? It was a bunch of young women that were brainwashed with the whole trans stuff. And they must have sneaked through security, and they must have brought in like bags of crickets that they probably got from the pet shop as lizard feed. So yeah, it was quite sad really, because they all had, like, the cleaners had to go in and vacuum them all up and stuff. And there were just dead crickets on the floor everywhere, and they were climbing up everyone's legs.
Oh, horrible. There's a sort of slightly biblical edged nastiness to it, isn't there? These people who presumably put this on as a plague.
Why do you think there's this level of anger about lesbians having a space compared to gay men having a space or trans people having a space? Why is it so unthinkable for lesbians?
Straight men don't like the fact that some women are only attracted to other women, and pornography under the title lesbian has a lot to do with that, because it teaches boys and men that lesbians are something for them, that women are doing it as a display for them, when in reality there are women that are only attracted to other women, and it has absolutely nothing to do with men. It just causes a lot of outrage that there's some women that are homosexual, and a lot of society just does not want to acknowledge that, and they treat lesbians like we don't exist most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great, is it? That sort of need to center themselves. And I suppose um lesbians are the one sexuality and the one space where men have absolutely no say and seemingly cannot stand that.
Exactly, yeah.
They just seem affronted to be even sort of softly barred, even sort of, you know, lesbians aren't sort of storming into cafes in the middle of the day and saying, all the men get out, we're having a lesbian meeting. You know, these spaces are quietly sort of tucked away. They're not, you know, confronting anyone. The level of rage or hate to release crickets and to harass lesbian spaces and to hunt them down like that, it's quite frightening. I mean, do you, does it, do you think, put people off from attending these events?
I think for a lot of young lesbians, they must deep down know that trans women is nonsense, but they must be absolutely terrified because of the backlash that they'll get because of it. I completely understand that it can be very scary speaking up about these issues and putting your name out there and everything, because you will get targeted and there'll be people wanting to, attack you and threaten you and stuff. Over the course of me speaking out, I've had some really nasty threats from trans activists, but so far I've not been attacked or anything, so that's good.
I suppose while you'll sort of get those threats and the downsides from that community, something that is also worth remembering is that there's so much support that you can get from other lesbians and gender critical women. I mean, how have you found that since you've sort of started speaking?
Since I've started speaking, I've had an incredible amount of support, especially from the older lesbians that are speaking out about it. They're very, very supportive, which is fantastic. I think that's really important, that the older lesbians support the younger ones that are trying to crawl their way out of this mess, basically, and to describe their experiences growing up. They need to talk to each other and, connect, because these women that are so ashamed of being lesbians, calling themselves trans men, they're not hearing these stories of what it's like growing up as a lesbian and everything like that from the older lesbians, and they really need to know that what they're experiencing and what they're going through is a completely relatable thing in terms of lesbian experience, because we all have really similar experiences a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, a lot of young women probably go through a similar route to you and they look for lesbian spaces and they can't find them and they're warned off of turfs. And I can see maybe finding trans spaces and being asked these sort of leading questions that they ask. Did you always feel slightly different? Did you not feel like the other girls? And the solution that they're given is a new gender identity and a brand new flag, which might seem very fun at the time, I suppose. Very serious connotations down the road. It seems really nice if we can sort of build and strengthen that lesbian community as well, so that girls have a better chance in the future of searching lesbian and finding things like lesbian strength and attending them. Because I imagine speaking to older lesbians must be very reassuring on the fact that, yeah, did you feel different growing up? Did you feel that you weren't like the other girls? You're a lesbian. Welcome to the club. You don't need to change anything, just be yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And it's so important that young lesbians are able to physically meet other, like, older lesbians at these events, like Lesbian Strength. But sadly, the problem is these events are not held often enough, because there is a lot of, like I say, preparation that has to go into it, like security and stuff, because it can be very unsafe going to these events. So it's so important that you have to go through all this preparation just to meet other lesbians. That's what it's like now. We need as many lesbians as possible to attend these events. But I think it makes it quite unpopular for lesbians around my age and younger, because all of them believe in this trans stuff, well, most of the time. So even when I tried advertising it on my TikTok that, hey, come to this lesbian strength event, there really wasn't any other younger lesbians around my age there. Yeah, it's quite difficult to get through to them.
I guess if we just sort of keep pushing, keep attending, keep supporting where we can, hopefully these events will grow and grow as more and more young people sort of find them. If people have been sort of interested in this topic today, are there any women out there whose voices you'd like to uplift? Any women of the moment that you would recommend people connect in with or look up?
So I would, for young lesbians, I'd highly recommend you watch Magdalene Burns' YouTube channel, and also Peach Yogurt Gender Free as well. That's another YouTube channel that I came across as well. And I think that's a really important one for young lesbians to watch also, because she discusses her experience growing up and feeling like really uncomfortable being female, like having a female body and stuff. And I think it will really clarify what young lesbians are feeling, and like the need to escape by, taking testosterone and these surgeries and stuff.
So, I imagine Magdalene smiling down on that.
Yes, of all the people that have a legacy, hers is very well deserved, I think.
Mm.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We will link Alison's social media on our Twitter page. You can follow us at Insightful Pod for updates about upcoming episodes. We'll also link her Women of the Moment so that you can look those up if you need to. We hope that you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do like, share, follow, and even leave a comment. And we hope we'll see you in the next episode.